I know the last session we had was probably quite heavy with for some maybe new material that they had not been familiar with. I'd like to start by just talking a little bit more about some of those topics that we covered last week, and then we'll carry them forward into Salah. Okay, so we started with this looking at the different levels of reality, and we talked about martaba al-wahidiyya and ahadiyya. And, you know, one way to just relate to this, you know, what does it mean? How can I really understand this? Is to look at your own self and consider that, you know, on the surface, when you look at yourself, you have certain attributes, sifat, and you perform certain actions. This is the level of wahidiyya, where you have multiple different attributes. You have knowledge, you have some degree of power, you have rahmah. All of these things are multiple attributes that you have as a person, okay? But if you look deep, deep, deep within yourself, ultimately, at your core, you are one person, one single reality. You are not made of parts, okay? This is also what's meant by the ayah, مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِرَجُلٍ مِّن قَلْبَيْنِ فِي جَوْفِهِ. The end of the day, deep within you, there is one center, one point, which is the center of you, the reality of you. And then from that reality, yes, multiple different attributes will show, but ultimately you have one simple central principle, which is your truth. And that's the difference that we're talking about between wahidiyya and ahadiyya. Okay, so that's one way to try to make it a little bit more understandable. Then we talked about fana and baqa, which I think for a lot of people is very unfamiliar in a way. And one thing that I should have included, and in fact I've added it to my slides this time, is the hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, "Mutu qabla an tamutu." Yeah, mutu qabla an tamutu. And this is exactly what we mean by fana. This is exactly it. It's also known as al-jihad al-akbar, and it's taken to its full extent, to the maximum limit of the jihad al-akbar. We know it's akbar because, you know, no matter how great jihad is on a physical level, this jihad is above that. He told them, what you've come back from now is jihad al-asghar. Now, what is ahead of you is jihad al-akbar. And so that's another way to understand, is to understand fana. So if we look at, for example, Imam Hussein and his willingness to sacrifice and give up everything and die in order to come to real life, right? In order to come to true life, you know, that's exactly what we're talking about at the spiritual level in terms of fana. In those beautiful words, he says, تركت الخلق طرا في هواك وأيتمت العيال. Why? لكي أراك. فلو قطعتني في الحب إربا لما مال الفؤاد إلى سواك. See? And look at those words. He's saying, في هواك, yeah? لكي أراك. And this willingness to give up everything out of love. في الحب. That's what you're being asked to do here. But this is at an even higher level. Imagine these words. This is a higher level than what he did on that day, because his true jihad was at a much deeper level than fighting with swords. That's the meaning of fana here. Now, are you being asked to die forever and be gone? No, fana, as we said, is not the end of this journey. Okay, it's not at the end. He says, بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. There is a different life that you gain from this. But that death is a necessary step. Imam Hussein is only Imam Hussein because he was willing to die. It's a necessary step. And so in the spiritual side, in the Irfani sense, we are talking about the death of the false I, not the true I. Okay. We'll go into this in more detail, especially when we get to Sajda, but there is a false I and then there's the true I. And what we are talking about that is the death of the false I. The true I cannot die. It will never die because it is that ruh that comes directly from Allah. And so what we're talking about is reaching a kind of becoming a spiritual shaheed. Okay. And in order to achieve a new life, but doing it in this life, not waiting for the next life, so that you achieve, you can say, hayatun ma'nawiyya haqiqiyya huna wa al-an, right? Here and now. And that's what is meant by baqa. And the means to do this, as I said them, those beautiful words, is through love. The secret of it is love. Because actually, if you see any kind of resistance to this idea, I don't really want to disappear and be absorbed in Allah or something like that. I want to have my separate existence. That is the false I speaking, and that shows an incompleteness of love. It's an incompleteness of what it takes, because it's really love that is the only thing that can let you give up everything, including your own existence, for the beloved. Just think about it. Only love for your children or your parents or your loved ones would be something that you would be willing to give up your own existence for. And that's why we use love as the way to eliminate this false I and reach this fana. Okay, so hopefully that makes it a little bit more clear by relating it to the physical version of jihad. But this is a much higher level where we are, first of all, doing it spiritually within us. And secondly, we're doing it here and now. You don't have to wait for the next life. You can experience it here. And then the third thing we talked about was the tajalliyat, and the concept of tajalli. And so the way to just understand that is that these are essentially mystical, spiritual experiences that will happen to us by the grace of Allah. It comes from Him, and it just removes these kind of veils that are preventing us from seeing things as they truly are. Okay. And that, unfortunately, is not something that can be taught. How to achieve tajalli is not something that's going to be taught. It just comes from doing the right things and having the right understanding, and then throwing yourself into it with pure ikhlas. It will come. It will happen. Okay. So with that, let's move to the material from this session. So we covered some of these before, and we began to lay out the roadmap for the rest of the Salah and how it connects with these concepts of tajalli and fana and baqa. Okay, So we start in the qiyam. Remember, up to now, we've done a lot of preparation and we've got all the way up to the point where we've done the takbirat. We've lifted all of those hujub nuriya, okay, and these veils. And we've done takbirat al-ihram, which is this very conscious moment where we enter that presence, okay? So now we are in the qiyam. And qiyam itself now represents a lot of these concepts that we've just discussed, okay? So qiyam, as I laid out in that diagram, is associated with tajalli al-fi'li, okay? Because that qiyam itself is a kind of fi'l. It's a standing position where you are standing. It's an active position. And it is associated with the specific name, Al-Qayyum, okay? Al-Qayyum. And as we know, the meaning of Al-Qayyum itself is Al-Qayyum huwa al-qa'imu binafsihi al-muqawwimu lighayrihi. Okay. And so the way to understand that is that not only he exists of himself by himself, but he keeps everything standing, qa'im, standing in existence, in wujud, and preventing it from falling into non-existence, adam. Okay, so that's why it's associated. Qiyam is associated with Al-Qayyum. So this is something you can keep your attention on, is Al-Qayyum. That you are not just standing, he is the one that is holding you in that standing position. Okay, now in our normal day-to-day experience, we experience life through a world of asbab, right? Cause and effect. So there are the laws of nature that govern how things work, and that's how we see things behaving on the surface. That's how life appears to work. What happens in tajalli al-fi'li is that a veil is removed. This hijab is removed from the world of illa wa ma'lul and asbab. And there now you see that in fact, there is only one that is doing all the actions. Everything is being enabled by one source of action. So this is a level of tawheed fi'li. And that is what is experienced in Salah in the standing position. So that's part of what we do as the practice, is see yourself standing, but in a way trying to recognize that your standing is happening only through his action. And so you surrender all action to him and just be the witness of everything that is happening. That's the practice in the qiyam position. Okay. Now, once we stand, we and enter the salah, we keep this in mind. And then, of course, we start the Fatiha. The Fatiha has many levels, obviously, of meaning behind it. I'm only going to touch on a couple of things that I have found to be very effective and powerful from a practical point of view. Want something that you can actually work on and not get caught into the thinking train, the monkey thoughts jumping from one thought to another, not thinking about the meanings, but feeling them. So we move to that next. And what I've done here is show that you can essentially take the surah and divide it into 3 parts, okay? And so the first part up to Medine is related to him. It's all about Allah himself, right? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin. It's all entirely describing him. It's all related to him. Then comes the most important ayah in the surah. And this is a level of presence we call al-mukhataba al-huduriyya. Okay? Because notice here that you are directly addressing him as though he is directly present with you. It's a very close, intimate position. Iyaka. Right? You're not talking about him from a distance. This is from very close now. Mukhataba huduriyya. It's a dialogue happening in presence. Iyaka na'budu, iyaka nasta'in. This, I would say, is one of those very crucial conscious moments. Okay, we want to develop an ability to be conscious and present throughout the salah. But if you remember, there were a couple of specific moments that we identified where you need to make sure at a minimum you are 100% conscious and aware and alert when you are saying this part. One of them was when we directed our attention to the Qibla. One of them was when we formed the niyyah. One was when we did takbirat al-ihram. Now we come to this mukhataba huduriyya, very crucial that you're very, very conscious at this moment because you are directly addressing him now. Okay, and then the remainder of the surah relates to you. Right? اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. It's all about it. It's not about him. It's about you. So it's divided in these three parts, and this is taken from the Hadith Qudsi, which I have on the next slide, which is, as I said, in my own experience, I can tell you, it's a very powerful way to engage with this surah and turn the qiyam position in particular, and of course the whole salah, into a dialogue. It's not meant to be a monologue of you just talking. He is also speaking to you. And this hadith really helps to do that. Okay, so the hadith says, he says, قسمت الصلاة بيني وبين عبدي نصفين ولعبدي ما سأل فإذا قال العبد الحمد لله رب العالمين قال الله تعالى حمدني عبدي وإذا قال الرحمن الرحيم قال الله أثنى علي عبدي وإذا قال مالك يوم الدين قال مجدني عبدي فإذا قال إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين قال هذا بيني وبين عبدي ولعبدي ما سأل فإذا قال اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين قال هذا لعبدي ولعبدي ما سأل. So beautiful. There is a dialogue here. And so what is the inner practice for us is that we say every word with heart and feeling, and then pause after each ayah. You pause so that you hear the reply. He is replying to you. And so give yourself that opportunity to hear that response. You remain grounded in that presence and remain silent for just a moment to hear that response. And this becomes part of that practice of inner silence that we've spoken about, because it's only if you silence the mind fully that you can hear his voice. So be present, be fully silent, and listen with longing, with shauq to hear his voice. And if you don't do this, it's as though you're saying you prefer your voice to hearing his voice. Tell yourself this so that you make that voice shut up. Just shut up and listen. Because your voice inside is what's preventing you from hearing his voice. And believe me, this alone is enough to turn that part of the salah, the qira'ah of the Fatiha, to be a beautiful experience that you go through, rather than just something mechanical that you do. Okay, so that's what I wanted to discuss related to Al-Fatiha. There are, of course, much more deeper levels of this. And then there's obviously the second surah. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail in these sessions, otherwise it will go on for a very long time. We can do it in more advanced sessions, perhaps in the future. And in fact, I think that's one thing we should do after we finish with Salah, is Surah Al-Ikhlas, Qul Huwa Allahu Ahad, which is a core part of Salah as well. It's not a requirement, but it's a very important thing that you can add to your Salah, is a surah that can be understood in along these irfani ways that are beautiful and can also help to enrich the Salah as well. All right. From there, we move into ruku', and we'll finish with ruku' today. And then the next session we do, inshallah, we go to sujood. Okay. So now that we've finished the qiyam part and the qira'ah, now, very importantly, before we go into ruku', there is a takbir. And this is an important one. And I've laid this out on this slide here, where before we even go into the ruku', we have the takbir, at-takbir qabla al-ruku'. Okay. Now, as I explained in the sessions before, where we talked about takbir and what it means and what it represents, nothing different here, except that we can apply it to this specific situation when, after saying all of these words, these are Allah's words himself. He has given us the Fatiha. He has told us to describe him as Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin. All of these are, of course, true and beautiful, and that's why we've been asked to say them. But at the end of the day, what we said before, ultimately, Allah cannot be described. Akbar min an yusaf. And so this, after saying the Fatiha and the second surah, we now do a takbir, and we acknowledge that everything we said so far is true, but does not ultimately describe his dhat. And so again, we lift our hands, recognizing that we are incapable of describing that dhat. Okay, so that is actually an important part of Salah, that takbir before ruku'. With that, now we enter ruku' itself. And the ruku', the ism, the name that is most associated with ruku' is al-azim, okay, al-azama. And this step in the Salah is associated with tajalli as-sifati. Okay, so we started with tajalli al-fi'li in the qiyam, and now we have gone into tajalli as-sifati. It's a kind of intermediate step. Okay, it's an intermediate step between the qiyam and the full qurba that comes with the sajda and the tajalli dhati that happens there. In between, we have the ruku'. And at the top, you see what it says, a beautiful, simple sentence. في الركوع أدب وفي السجود قرب ومن لا يحسن الأدب لا يصلح للقرب. So the ruku' is a preparation for the sajda. Okay, and so at this level, we immerse ourselves in the sifat. Okay, and sifat al-'azama can be the primary one that we focus on, and that hopefully will bring about the tajalli. ليتجلى لقلبك نور عظمة عرش الحضرة الواحدية. The wahidiyya, remember, associated with the sifat. Okay, and from the hadith Qudsi at the bottom here, you see how beautifully and just so amazing the description of what happened to Rasulullah in the Mi'raj, where Allah says to him, ثم طأطئ يديك واجعلها على ركبتيك فانظر إلى عرشي. فقال رسول الله فنظرت إلى عظمة ذهبت لها نفسي وغشي علي فألهمت أن قلت سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده لعظم ما رأيت. فلما قلت ذلك تجلى الغش عني فرجعت إلى نفسي كما كانت. How amazing what he saw in terms of عظمة. فانظر إلى عرش. And so we are being invited to do the same thing. And note that he actually loses consciousness in that situation. This is fana fil sifat. This is how it is understood, is actually becoming completely fani, this sifat, and losing that self-awareness in that position. So inspiring to be aware of what he went through, and we are following in those footsteps. Now, on the right side here, I have some more technical things. I'm not sure I will go into this in too much detail. It's a very Irfani concepts about the tasbih itself. When we say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim wa bihamdih, these words have very deep technical meanings behind them. I'll just give an indication of what those are. I don't want to go into too much detail because it's quite advanced. This is more for the advanced level course in the future. But basically, we have tasbih, and we have tahmeed, and we have ta'zeem, these three. And it relates to a core concept in Irfan, which is called tanzih and tashbih. Okay, and the fact is that Allah is beyond, He is above both tanzih and tashbih. Or you can say that He is both at the same time. Tanzih and tashbih apply to Him. So He's unconditioned, unconstrained, okay? He's not muqayyad by either one of those. So the tasbih is related to tanzih, okay? It is tanzih عن التوصيف وتقديس عن التعريف. This is how we understand Allah as being beyond anything that we can know, okay? ليس كمثله شيء applies to this. That's what tasbih is. Tasbih relates to this. ليس كمثله شيء. He's beyond everything that we can know and understand. Okay? Tahmeed is associated with tashbih. Okay? And this is the part that is usually much less familiar for people. and confusing. How can you say that there is any kind of tashbih? In Irfan, we believe that you have to embrace both tanzih and tashbih. And tahmid represents al-dhuhur fil mara'i al-khalqiyya. Okay? Hamd, when you are praising him, there is some form of manifestation that is being referred to. Okay? Some form of manifestation, some kind of dhuhur. Okay? Because he's not just al-batin, الذي ليس كمثله شيء. No, he is also الظاهر. الظاهر. And tahmid relates to that dhuhur. الظهور في المرائي الخلقية, how he is manifest in everything that we see. Okay, and then the ta'zeem is what brings the two together, because it's salb al-tahdid, meaning that it is not correct to only think of Allah in terms of tanzih, because then it would only be tasbih. It is also not correct to only focus on tashbih and the tahmid associated with that. He is both. Bidun hudud. Without any constraints or limits, he is able to be both, be described by both, or neither, you can say. Salb al-tahdid. And so what we're left with is فهو الظاهر وليس في العالم أظهر منه وفي الوقت نفسه ليس متلبسا بلباس التعينات الخلقية. Okay. He is manifest in everything, but he's also hidden. He is hidden, but he can be seen manifest in everything, and neither of them constrain him in either way. So this is the deep level of ta'zeem. When we say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, this is wa bihamdih. This is what we are saying in totality. Okay, it's quite advanced. There's a lot of very deep ideas behind what I just described. Just giving you a flavor of it. But for you, what you take away from it is this azama, which is beyond description, but at the same time is not separate from this world. It is manifest through even your sifat, your azama, your qudra, your ilm, and even in a small dimension that it exists in you, is a reflection of his ilm, his qudra, his rahmah, his etc. etc. So if you look at the bullet points here, you see yourself feel his attributes in every positive attribute that you are aware of. That is a reflection of his attributes. This is the meaning of ruku'. Okay. And then finally, we finish with رفع الرأس من الركوع. So the ruku' is not over until we raise our heads from the ruku'. So there's three parts, right? We did the takbir قبل الركوع. We have the ruku' itself, and now we're coming out of the ruku' and we do رفع الرأس من الركوع. This itself also has some meanings behind it. It represents exiting from the limitations of the sifat. Okay, so as we said in the previous session, that kamal al-tawheed nafy al-sifat anhu, there is a level above the sifat, that's the dhat. And so when we lift ourselves from that ruku', we are exiting the level of the sifat, and now we are preparing to approach the dhat, that position of qurba. Okay, and then again at this point we do a takbir, acknowledging that everything we said in the ruku', Subhana Rabbi al-Azim wa bihamdih, all of this, it is correct, but it is not a description of him. هو أكبر من أن يوصف. So once more we say takbir. Okay, and then continuing with the Hadith Qudsi, it's amazing. He says, now this is where I'll stop for today, because we will now, from here we go into the sajda and sujood, but just as a preparation, the Hadith says, فقال ارفع رأسك فرفعت رأسي فنظرت إلى شيء ذهب منه عقلي فاستقبلت الأرض بوجهي ويدي. So that standing again from the position of ruku' itself has some deeper spiritual reality and meaning behind it. And so we need to acknowledge that as we go through it. So you need to do the salah not too fast, not too slow, but slow enough that you acknowledge each of these points, these milestones, as we go through them. Okay, so inshallah that's been helpful and given you some deeper understanding of what these positions represent. But even more importantly, I'm conscious that I've introduced a lot of theory, but I hope that you see some clear instructions here as well on what to do internally as we went through the Fatiha, what to do internally as you go through that dialogue, that pause to hear the response. That kind of adab is how we can turn specific instructions into things that we can work on and do these step by step. Don't get caught up in thinking. Take these things slowly, step by step. It took me personally a very long time to absorb all of this so that it is part of you, not something you have to think about. So it takes time, but with practice, amazing experiences are waiting for you. Thank you.